Hi, everybody. Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather report for the week of June 23rd through the 29th. And we've got a new moon in Cancer at 5 degrees conjunct Jupiter, but also in a square with the Saturn Neptune conjunction and in a yod with Pluto and Mars. So a lot going on tied around that this week. And then also Mercury having quite an adventure this week. It's hitting the five outer planets, and if you include Chiron as one of them, and it's also changing signs going into Leo. So, a lot to talk about this week, okay? And just a little business first. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog and YouTube channel, and I've been doing it for 6, 7 years now on YouTube, years before that on podcasts. And if you like what you see and you have a YouTube account, I'd really like you to become a follower. And then don't forget when you do that to turn your notifications on, because that way you'll know when the blog is posted. You won't miss it. Also, if you like what you see, I really would love if you pay it forward, the free service, by passing the link on to somebody else that you think might be interested. Over 50% of the world believes in astrology these days, guys. So that's at least half your contacts, right? If you've done it for me before, please do it again. Thank you so much on that. And remember, if you're not used to astrology, don't get hooked up so much on the terms of what I'm saying, the astrological terms. You want to really listen to what's in between the interpretations so that you can work with the energy this week, maybe get more in harmony with your life and flow and what's going on in the world with the energy. So also remember, the podcast is also still available on podcast. If you don't want to do the video, the YouTube, and you just want an audio feed, you're driving around doing something like that, you just want to hear the audio, it's the same exact audio as what's on the video, and so you don't miss anything there, and it frees you up to do it maybe on a time when you wouldn't be able to hear it otherwise. And then also, if you have an Instagram page, Astrological Winds channel has one of them too, and I do put it in the news feed, the link to the YouTube every week. And also always can find it on my website, www.astrologicalwinds.com. There's a little tab up top that has the blogs, and it has months before too, the monthlies, the annual, things like that are there. It also has my menu for my professional services. I've been doing charts professionally for over 20 years after 7 years of formal training. I would love to do your chart. And, if it's your birthday month, you can take 10% off any kind of reading that you want. So treat yourself to a great birthday present. All right, I'll get more into details with that stuff later. But check the website out, www.astrologicalwinds.com. There's a direct contact there for me. There's my other email there. All right, so what I really want to start out this month with, or this week with, is a couple comments on things from the past and what's been going on in the world. And first off, I want to comment on that full moon in Sagittarius from 2 weeks ago, that fiery full moon in Sagittarius that I talked about, and how that was square the nodal axis. And I'd just like to go over, that some of the events that have occurred since that very fiery full moon. We had Israel start bombing Iran, and now just yesterday, the United States joined the attack. We had political assassinations on the U.S.'s soil. We had a massive airplane crash, over 200 lives lost in India. We've seen the war in Russia and Ukraine go into like new territory where the bombing back and forth, even with civilians, has really picked up. And we've also had some very intense heat waves in the United States, forest fires, and we had a volcano blow up in Indonesia. Notice all these events, the heat, the fire, the out of control energy that, really is conflagrating things, and since that full moon. So really got to see a lot of how that full moon came out in the world, and was there fiery things going on in your life, too. Then the second thing I want to really hammer home, and you may have heard me say this before, I definitely said it in the annual report for the year in 2025, and probably mentioned it even before that. I had thought for years, literally years, guys, like literally going back 5, 6 years from before, 2025 is going to be one of the most delicate years in the world's history based on where things are at. And I really felt like when Neptune was going to be a big trigger, Neptune going into Aries after it was in Pisces, a sign that it really likes, and still created all kinds of division over belief systems for the better part of 15 years. And then we go into Aries and we're ready to go into war over those belief systems, and also go into war over the things that Neptune rules, like oil, and that the fact that most of our energy comes from petroleum products, and also water, and fresh water, and the needs for fresh water. And so, like, really, what's going on in the Middle East right now, I'm not choosing any sides. I can be actually pretty apolitical. I'm more of an observer of history. Um, but this can easily conflagrate into like a gigantic war, like, yes, a world war, and yes, it could lead to, like, the fear of nuclear stuff happening on our planet. We have to be very aware of how delicate this time is right now. The trajectory of the world and the energy right now, where we're at, and this Aries energy is just so impulsive, and Neptune's all about our beliefs, and Saturn's all about strong arming them. And you can literally see how the authorities of the world are doing that right now. Like, they are literally strong arming their personal beliefs, and projecting them as like their whole country's belief system, which is never actually the case. There's always, like, within countries, different ways that the different parts of the population want to see things done. So I just really feel like we have to be really aware right now that we are, like, we've gone on a trajectory of world events where, like, individuals that are not leaders don't have very much influence anymore on how that's going to play out. And with Neptune and Saturn both going into Aries, Pluto just going into Aquarius, which is another sign that gets very fixed and stubborn about what it believes in, and can get very destructive, just like Neptune and Saturn can. And even later in the year, when Uranus goes into Gemini, that just to me is like, yeah, more improved weaponry, like when it comes to war using technology. So we're in a really dangerous place, with the world right now. And so I just wanted to bring those two things up, two things that I did talk about, the full moon and this Neptune, and go back to the annual report if you haven't heard it yet, to get really into the details of that. It's definitely not something I'm rooting for. I hope that I'm wrong, but, it doesn't look like I am. So anyway, what I want to talk about mainly this week is this new moon, which is exact on Wednesday. It's at 4 or 5 degrees Cancer. So that's where you want to look in your chart, where your 4 or 5 degree Cancer spot is. And that house is the house where it's a new moon, get to see new opportunities that, get to bring new things in. And remember, if you have any other planets that are in that 4 or 5 degree, 3, 4, 5 degree range, they're also going to be aspecting this new moon in your chart. So that will actually color that energy also. So yeah, so this is like, it's a really intense one. And one of the things I want to talk about first in relation to all that, like, in the sense that, first off, it's like I said, it's squaring the Saturn and Neptune conjunction, which I've been talking about a lot the last couple months, about how that's challenging us to put into reality our visions and our ideals, and showing us how difficult that can actually be. And then it's also in this yacht, so it's sextiling Mars in Virgo, and both Mars is quincunx Pluto, which I talked about in last week's blog, and this conjunction of the moon and sun, the new moon, with Jupiter in Cancer, also quincunx that yod. Okay. And so, the yod is a very interesting aspect because it's like when you look at it, it looks like a finger, right? Right. See, it's like coming to a point, and it's actually considered the most faithfully driven aspect of all the aspects. It's one where you just kind of have to go along for the ride. It's unclear what this destination point actually is. And if you try to control it, it can get very awkward and weird because of the two quincunxes. There's not a lot going on in common between the planets. So if you try to control it, it can really go off rails for you. But I tell people, it's like the analogy to me is like being on a roller coaster ride, right? And you just have to you have to go with the flow, right? You're going up and you're going down and you're around curves, and you're moving your body with that. So you're in a constant state of like adjusting, right? And that's how you have to handle a yacht. It's like you're on a ride, you're not in control of the ride. It's going to bring you to some thrilling point if you just let it go. But if you try to control it, it can be very fearful and difficult, and it can be hard to let go of certain things. But the more you let go, the more you're able to adjust and go with the flow. So that's what we really want to do when we get into a thing with the yacht. Now, one of the things too about this new moon in Cancer, remember, when we go onto the world, Cancer is, it's from a world's perspective, is a very patriotic, nationalistic sign. So you can see how that can actually cause a lot of issues with this. But the moon is actually in the sign that it rules, Cancer, and Jupiter is in the sign that it's exalted in. So, on a personal level, I think that this new moon could be really good for individuals who handle the energy really well. So, I think that's one of the things that that for on a personal level we can work with this, but there's a lot of fate being tied up on what's going on in the world stage that we're all having to react to. And and this is definitely like leaders doing their little power trip about what they believe in and what they have emotional conviction behind, and also using, like Mars, weapons of war that they've perfected to create a lot of destruction and death and violence. And that's the Pluto part. So, you can really see, like, the Cancer can really cause the leaders and the people in nations to get very patriotic, very nationalistic, and go to war, to really fighting. And then tap in with this energy, and it can get very violent very quickly. So that's just stuff to be aware of on that kind of energy. Now, one of the things I want to just do before I go into it any further, I just want to backtrack a little bit to the outer aspect that's really driving a lot of this, and that is Jupiter quincunx Pluto. I talked about that when I did the monthly, and so, like, it's really important, in the quincunx. You have to remember that they're in two signs that have nothing to do with one another. There's no harmony whatsoever. So there's like this constant having to like deal with awkward energy that just feels off and it doesn't feel right. There's no flow to it. So once again, constantly adjusting, constantly having to let things go and release things so that the energy can at least start to move forward a little bit again. And so, like, when you think about this too, the Jupiter with Pluto is all about like using power to try to change things, right? But when it's with a quincunx, it's really bumpy. The tendency is for people to get really selfish in the way they're doing that, really like, hell bent in the way they're doing that. And they can end up getting in serious conflicts with one another because of that. So, do we see this going on with the leaders of our world right now? They're trying to force changes that they're not even sure what the final result of that is going to be. So it's like something where, people literally start to, under this energy will really start to question each other's motives, and you find out that it can be very difficult to reason with one another, that that people can get very entrenched. Like I said, it's about like, okay, like now I'm just gonna, try to dominate you instead. I'm gonna just try to like, even if I'm not sure I've got the right way, that I'm just going to treat pushing it that way anyway. So when you look at the world right now, you can see how this is such a sensitive point in relation to all that stuff going into Aries and all that other energy I mentioned of like bringing the proclivity up for war and violence and destruction. This can be a really triggering point for that. And so, like, really what it's saying is, if we want to get through this, we have to adjust a lot of our values and belief systems. And we have to start working within our power and influence for the good of all, not for the just good of ourselves or the good of a small group of people or even like one nation. And I know that can be difficult for people to hear, but like otherwise, what do we get? We get war. So let me get back to the new moon now, but I just really wanted to, reiterate, which I did talk about in the monthly, how difficult this Jupiter Pluto power energy is to find a balance with it. It's just a little too blind and stuck on its own beliefs and not really sensitive to how that's affecting other people. So it can really bring a lot of destruction even to its own ends by the means that it's using, really. So like when we get back to the new moon, just as a pure thing in itself, conjunct Jupiter with the moon in Cancer and Jupiter in Cancer is actually very strong. And you would think that's a very beneficial thing. And like I said, I do think for individuals, this can be a really great seeding time. This is a time when we can really seed some great big plan or vision for the future that can bring in a lot of benefits, a lot of growth on all kinds of levels. So I really do like that energy for the individuals. It's in society where I start to worry about that. But that, really, what is that moon in Cancer looking for? It's looking for emotional input. It's looking to feel secure and safe. I've said this about Cancer a lot of times over the years. It wants to know that it and its loved ones are having its basic needs met. That's when it feels emotionally secure. That's food, that's shelter, that's health care, okay? That's those basic things, nurturing. And when it doesn't get that, what Cancer does is what our world leaders are doing right now. It starts to try to control everything, including its loved ones. It gets very manipulative. It can get blind in the way that it's acting, and it can play a lot of games. So there's like a lot of danger right now out on the world stage, because there's countries that don't feel like they're getting their needs met on those levels. And, they are ready to go out and just like attack. But otherwise, this energy is very generous on a personal level, very enthusiastic, wants to bring more in. The biggest issue with this is once again feeling like you have the right answer for everyone and getting into this thing of blind faith and zealotry, self righteousness, even arrogance. And once again, where do we see that played out? Out in the world, anyway. So then we get it squaring the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So I've been talking about this conjunction for 2 months again. And what's it saying again? All right, great plans, great visions to start something. And they're based on some really high ideals that you may have. Okay, so now reality is going to come along and test them. That's the square. It's going to be like, okay, are your ideals really able to fit in reality, or even better, or even more so, do you believe in your ideals enough that you'll do the hard work to put them into reality? Because if you fold, that means you never believed in them that much anyway. And I know that can sound really harsh, but that's what that thing's saying to us right now. If you give up because of the circumstances around you in your personal life or in the world life, then you never really believed in that stuff that strongly. And that's what Saturn's saying to you. He's like the great taskmaster. If you really believe in this stuff, then you've got some duties to live up to. You've got some hard work to do. You've got some obligations. Um, so, so I really think, that, and you can see once again how that is feeding the energy on the world stage where you do have leaders that are having a hard time putting their beliefs into reality, and it's become very destructive to them. And unfortunately that drags in their people too. So I mean, you can really see that energy playing out on the world stage for me, and it may hurt. I mean, Saturn's like I said, he's a great taskmaster. He's like, what are you going to do? You're going to have to stand up here and be strong, and you're going to have to be tough, and you're going to have to take some pain in order to do this, and work on that. If you want those visions to come into reality, if you really believe in that, then yeah, it's going to require some sacrifice. It's going to require responsibility. It's going to require some pain. And then we go back to the yacht. And once again, it's like I told you, it's like you have to go along with this flow of energy. There's a lot of energy available here with Mars and Pluto, a lot of explosive energy, that goes along with that. And this, with the moon and sun and Jupiter all hitting Pluto, what is that saying again? It's saying power struggles. That if you want to bring in some great transformation, that you can expect there's going to be people who react to that, and there's going to be blowback, and there's going to probably be a lot of power struggles that are going on with that energy, you know but with Pluto at the front of this yacht, it's showing that transformation is the thing. It's just very highly explosive energy, all this together, and we can get very, very defensive with it. We can get very much into wanting control things because we can sense it's a great time of great, great change going on. And usually we automatically react to that in a defensive kind of way, especially with all the Cancer energy too. It's gonna, I mean, this stuff can really bring out intense emotions, like that range from extreme love to extreme hate. You know, and it can really bring up a lot of stuff buried deep in the psyche of individuals and nations, of the way they get security and feeling like the world is changing so much that they can't do that, so people can act out very extremely. This is not moderate energy. This is a time of great changes in the inner psyche, and and there's a lot of turmoil because of that, and it's being brought out into the world. And then when that happens, there's an automatic resistance, an automatic defensive posturing. There's a fear that we're losing control of our lives. There's a fear that we're being manipulated by others, so then we try to out manipulate them. So they can get very extreme points of view with this energy. And because of that, people can act out very strongly. It's very difficult to find emotional support from anybody when everybody's in emotional distraughtness. And that's kind of what's going on. And what we have to do is learn how to release some of these emotions, it can feel like we're being misled, that we're not being completely told the truth. It's very fanatical kind of energy, and but the Mars and Neptune with the Sun and Jupiter can give great efforts, incredible power to tap into, but and if you can keep it disciplined, you can achieve a lot. You can really achieve a lot, but you have to be really careful, because while you're doing that, you could be putting so much energy into it that you could actually be sapping your strength out from behind, and you may have to once again make some serious adjustments to your physical output. But I mean, this is definitely on the social level, can indicate war and violence and destruction. I can't lie to you guys about that. It really requires incredible discipline to keep this energy under control. And it's much easier for an individual to do that than a society or a nation or a group. And, I mean, one of the things too for individuals with this energy is to throw that into a very large project, something that is beneficial to others and socially. So there is no ruler of this new moon, because the moon in Cancer rules itself. So, like, there's a purity there. But I really, ultimately, on a personal level, I really think this is an opportunity to bring an incredible change into your life that can be really beneficial, as long as you're willing to meet the hard reality and do the work that's required in the real world to do that. It can be a very powerful transformative time for us if we're willing to do that, and it can change our reality, ultimately. But otherwise, I really think, if you're not going to stand behind your beliefs, your reality is going to fold in and crash in on you. And like, or if you're trying to be one of these people who forces them onto others, you're going to bring a lot of destruction around you. And we're getting great examples of that in the world. Okay, I need to move on from that, you guys. Mercury has quite a journey this week, too. So, starting off on Tuesday, when it squares Chiron, right before it changes signs, it's going to hit Chiron and Uranus. So when it squares Chiron, this is a lot blending in with a lot of the energy of the full moon again. It's a very pushy energy on the intellectual level. It's once again almost kind of like we're looking for an argument. We're looking for a debate over the things that are on our mind, the beliefs that we have, and we're ready to just go off. We can get really insensitive in this. And there's definitely a desire to learn more, but it comes from like the contrarian position of like, okay, well, you're going to have to prove this to me. I mean, we can definitely get into using words as weapons and, really create some mental scarring with each other. So be careful about that energy. It can be very judgmental and harsh at times. Thursday, Mercury will sextile Uranus before it goes into Leo. So when Mercury sextiles Uranus, that is great, because it just connects the intuition and the intellect really well. The intuition is able, or the right brain kind of energy is able to feed the intellect lots of ingenious ideas that really stimulate the intellect. And so it's a day where the intellect can make a lot of new discoveries, even right around the environment that we're in. We might not even leave home and find some really interesting new discoveries that day, or it can be just like in your local area too. But it's a day where, we're very innovative minds, so we can come up with new solutions to old problems, to things that we had never thought about before, and a problem that might have been a problem for a long time just suddenly is resolved really quickly under this energy. So it's definitely a day where you want to do something different, have some kind of new experience, something that kind of the mind can get into, excited about. But it also can have some very, and like Mercury being the ruler of communications, can have some very enlightening discussions and conversations to people about subject matter that is important to us. Also a good day for the use of science and technology. The mathematical good day for coding. The good day for like that part of our brain works really well. The creative, intellectual part of our brain, and then later in the day, Mercury goes into Leo. And remember, usually what Mercury goes through a sign in what 2.5, 3 weeks, but now it's going to start slowing down. If you remember, Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year, and I told you guys at the beginning of the year it's going to be in fire signs this year again for the most part. So we are getting ready for our second Mercury retrograde. It's going to be smack dead in the middle of the summer in the northern hemisphere. And so when Mercury is going into Leo on Tuesday, it is not going to leave Leo until September 3rd, you guys. Almost the whole summer it's going to be in Leo because it's going to go retrograde on July 18th at about halfway through the sign. And so it's going to stay in Leo. So I'm going to give an early warning right now about Mercury retrograde in Leo on July 18th. Next 2 or 3 weeks, you make any impulsive decisions that come from a place of pride, arrogance, self righteousness, they are going to come back and bite you all summer long. The dragon, he bite you. Fire, he bite you. Be really careful about being impulsive right now, being prideful and egotistical about your thoughts and words, because you are going to set yourself up for some serious backlash during the summer when Mercury goes retrograde. And right now, we've got a bunch of leaders who are doing it already. So I can tell you right now, a lot of the decisions they make over these next 2 or 3 weeks are going to come back and bite them and their reputation, and the countries and the people and populace that they rule over are going to pay a lot of the prices for the decisions that are being done right now. So, but Mercury in Leo believes that he's right. Very attached to our ideas, very prideful of our ideas, ego wrapped up in our ideas, and so it's very difficult to change somebody's mind. Mercury's in Leo. We are very stubborn. The truth can be inconvenient, you know, or we can define what the truth is just for ourselves. You feel like you're the one who's right, and therefore you're always going to push and direct others and trying to suck them into your plans too, trying to be the director. But this can come off as a very arrogant type of attitude. Good things about Mercury and Leo is we will put a lot of energy into resolving problems that are right in front of us that are really important to us. And it is a good time too where we can get advice or give advice to others of things that we are more familiar with and kind of a leader with. And then Friday and Saturday, Mercury will trine actually the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So this is like the sextile to Mercury to Uranus. This is really good. I think this is a time where we can use the mind to blend together those greater ideals and visions that Neptune bring in, the imagination and the inspiration, and take the Saturn part and be really serious about getting that stuff in and wanting to see some practical results with it. So we're willing to work on that stuff. We're willing to get exacting with our visions, to work on the details, have a really serious eye attitude about getting those ideals into the world, and we'll do the things we have to do to plan and organize that, not just blow it off. So your mind is acute, but it's also very inspired, and so it can focus well on the plan and bringing the details down in that plan and getting them done. So a lot of it has, it's just about, once again, just like having this, filtering the creativity of the right brain over into the tools that the left brain has so that you can get them out into reality. But it can bring a lot of clarity to the vision, and once again, this is another aspect where it's a really good time where you can see mistakes and flaws or issues that you had that maybe stuck for a while that you can make corrections now on. You can see another way out. And then I mean to me the other thing, the last thing to mention this week is Sunday, where Mercury is opposite Pluto. And remember, those outer planets have been saying it for weeks, all in the lower degrees of signs. So when a planet changes signs, it's hitting all three of them. And so when Mercury goes into Pluto, this can give a very intense mind that wants to get to the bottom of any issue, especially with the opposition that you have with others. So this is a sign of conflict usually with others. It can be really hard to agree with someone else. This is the sign of a really big argument, like, where you're not backing down and the other person is not either from your point of view. So you got to be careful of this because this is the kind of thing that can light up long held, feelings that, like you were dissed or something. And it can be like a long, slow simmering kind of conflict that can start under this energy. There can be a lot of grievances that build up, under over time with this. But this is also the energy of propaganda. So whatever we're being told by others, we should highly question it. Especially if we feel like that, and and be careful of being that way yourself, being too pushy with your own propaganda. It's a great time, because our mind is so obsessive and really likes to get to the bottom of things. The best thing to do with this is to go, do some research, online in a library or whatever. Really, you can do a lot of good looking into your own psyche too, and even maybe get help from a counselor or consultation of some type. But whatever your mind fixes on Sunday, it's going to be really hard for it to like break off of that, and it can blow things way out of proportion and pretty much push everything else out. So that's what I got for this week, you guys. It's definitely a very intense week. We can see it going on in the world. There's not a lot we can do, to really control that. I do think there is a lot we can do personally with this new moon, but it is having a lot to do with like, yeah, I need to like work on the reality of it and not just have this vision anymore, but like, but there can be great power if we allow ourselves to go along on that ride and not, and continue to come from a space where we're not only trying to benefit ourselves, but benefit anyone we influence in our own little spheres of influence. There's great power in this new moon to do that, but it's going to require a lot of discipline. But Saturn will pay off great rewards if you do that in the future, if you're up for the task now, if you can go along with the transformations that are going on now. But as for the world, we've really brought ourselves to a very delicate point, and it is definitely concerning to see the way it continues to go right now, because this energy is just going to feed that zealotry, that blindness of being stuck on something and feeling insecure or defensive about anything else. So hopefully, we can, find some, balance in all of this. All right. So next week, I'll not only look at the weekly, I will also look at the month of July. And I know, like I told you guys, Mercury is going retrograde next week. Neptune also goes retrograde. So that's the second outer planet will be joining Pluto, also retrograde. And then Venus next week is going to move on also, I believe. Venus, yeah, I think Venus goes into Gemini next week too, you guys. So yeah, yes, it does. So we got a few things to talk about next week and next month. This is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. You are going to pass the link along right now to somebody else. If you'd like to give like a currency donation, I do accept them. Venmo at Matthew, 2 T's, hyphen Lawton, Lauten, or Cash App, $Matthew Lawton, all one word. And no amount is too small. I appreciate, the blog does actually cost me a little money to put out. And, I know I'm giving valuable information out there. So if you can pay it forward or give a little donation, that's great. The best way to support me is when you are ready for a professional astrology reading. I do all different types, including birth charts, predictive readings for the next year, relationships, all kinds of stuff. Check my webpage out. Also, if you have a group looking for a lecture, workshop, class, that's also on my website. I have been a professional astrologer for over 20 years. Been doing charts for over 20 years, had 7 years of formal training, and would love to do that for you. Check the menu of the types of charts I have on the website, www.astrologicalwinds.com. And if you need to pay me in installments, we can do that as long as you can put half down. And if it's your birthday month and you need a natal chart reading or a predictive reading or the combination, the two together, you can take 10% off in your birthday month. So a little bit of a savings there for sure to maybe inspire you. Remember, that chart never leaves you guys. That if you're doing this vlog and you don't know your chart yet, or you haven't had it done by a professional, you really need to get that done as soon as you can as a gift to yourself. Really, okay? All right. Well, I think that's all I got. I'll see you all next week and we'll take a look at July and the weekly. Until then, let's try to skate this new moon and discipline ourselves and hope that it brings us individually to some great new beneficial horizons and growth.